This is Tim Wasberg from Travel Track on Sirk TV. I'm here in Sonoma County, California to visit the Kunde Winery. We'll be talking to both the owner and the winemakers about what it takes to create a great vintage.
The evolution of farming on Kunde Family Winery. Essentially what we have here is, these are vines planted in 1882. So you're talking 135-year-olds, completely dry farmed, and they've been squeaking through life, literally living in rock. So we have this nice little bench on the top of the plateau that we're on. It actually gets very steep on the other side. You're about 35% slope. So this all holds intact based on this rock and actually these vines throwing their roots down to hold everything in place. The entire 30-acre parcel that actually expands all the way around us here, we're talking in a really good year, maybe we get 70 tons of grapes. At 135 years old, essentially they are going to wake up on their own timeline. They ripen at their own timeline, and it isn't something you can force. Being dry farmed and being a subject to their own elements, with a view like this, how can they not be good, right? At their age, they live life on their own terms and on their own timeline. So we've actually been out now for about 2.5 weeks. And what's really cool is if you look closely at some of these clusters, this is actually the beginning of the cluster. So the primoria for the cluster developed in the bud last year, and lo and behold, that is a grape cluster. So right now we're starting to already get an idea about our fruitfulness, because you'll notice on the backside there's actually a second one right there. So we actually have both of our clusters for this growing season. And all of that developed, in May, June of last growing season. Depending on the varietal, some are more fruitful in a cane pruning like this one is, or spur pruning, depending on what you're trying to do. You'll see a lot of stuff here cane pruned ultimately because we don't want a whole lot of carbohydrate storage. When you have this old lignified wood, this is going to be a lot of the nutrition storage for the plant itself. So this will only be here. This cane is only 1 year old, and these get replaced every year back to this main trunk section. So you'll notice there's actually a replacement spur at the top. This shoot right here will end up being this lignified wood right here next year.
So why does this environment, the specific spot we're standing on, why does that dictate to you Cab Franc?
Cabernet Franc is, for me at least, the Pinot Noir of the Bordeaux world, as in it is the most finicky of the Bordeaux style grapes to grow and to truly get right. And the reason I say that is I am a Cab Francophile. I love Francs. I have always struggled and tried to enjoy Chenin, but for me, I'm used to ripe flavors. I'm born and raised. I'm a native of California, and I'm used to ripe flavors. So when you start getting that herbal background, a little bit of bell pepper, green bean, string bean even, for me, that's not a fruit. That goes back to that, am I drinking V8 or am I drinking a nice wine? So when you think about a spot for Cabernet Franc, we are looking at a due south face. We're going to get the most radiant temperature. I mean, when that sun is overhead, it is literally beaming down on this. And with the amount of rock in this soil, very steep, so the drainage is very intense. It creates a very high stress environment. And I think franc in particular is one of those that needs to get a certain level of stress to it, otherwise it has the ability to overcrop and keep that excess catechin. You notice how that's a set of shoulders on this cluster. So that's actually one single cluster that's got a big old shoulder on it. So this is what I mean about franc has the ability to put out some pretty large clusters. Here's another great example.
Because it's required to be robust.
Exactly. It wants to be very fruitful. So this is going to have two giant shoulders on this main cluster. So it has that ability to try to produce more than maybe it should, which means it usually takes a lot more hand labor. But also that's why we want a lot of that radiant heat in order to burn off all those green flavors. You know, sunlight is what's really going to break down the catechins over time.